Today we are talking energy, sustainability and everything STEM with, it's safe to say, quite an esteemed trio. We have Professor Joseph Howe of the Thornton Energy Research Institute at the University of Chester, Dr. Carolina von Palma, Senior Lecturer in Chemical Engineering at the Department of Chemical Engineering, University of Chester, and the younger but no less awe-inspiring and Chemical Engineering PhD student at the University of Chester, Reace Edwards. Nice to see everyone, virtually that is. Professor Howe, you have been researching and studying sustainable forms of energy for a great number of years now. How has the industry evolved since you began studying it?
Blimey. I've been involved with studying energy and sustainability for too long, 30 years or so now. 1985 was when I started my undergraduate degree. Yeah, 35 years, it just seems like yesterday. I think that it's changed substantially during that time. I remember back in 1990 when, well, it was about 1988 actually, when Mrs. Thatcher, who was Prime Minister at the time, she predates Reace and Carolina, but it was Mrs. Thatcher who was the Prime Minister at the time, suddenly turned green and suddenly started to talk a lot about the issues of sustainability. Now, for me back then, that was a bit of a game changer for me, because I've been out on the streets, I've been campaigning before then about the whole issue of climate change, and it was a bit of a game changer. And I thought, this is great, because we've got a right of centre Prime Minister who's pro-industry, who's talking about green issues. This may well be a significant opportunity for us. And since 1990, we have seen quite a substantial reduction in the amount of greenhouse emissions from the UK. It has dropped off quite a lot. We've seen about a 40% reduction in that time in the UK. But an industry has really stepped up to the mark and has been leading the way in so many activities around greenhouse gas emissions and reducing them. However, I think I would argue that, most of the reductions have been around demand management and reducing energy costs and inserting new technologies. And we're now reaching a bit of an impasse right now in terms of where do we go to in the future, and are we actually going to really significantly make inroads into delivering on net zero, either be it from industry or wider society and economy? And I'll go quiet there, because otherwise I'll just talk to the cows come home about it. Go on.
So how has the listening or viewing audience changed as well? Has it changed with the industry, and in what ways?
I think the viewing audience, we've all changed. We've all changed. I think we've gone from a position where we didn't really, or many people didn't really consider issues of sustainability, of climate change, of the cost associated with energy, be it financial or be it environmental. And now I think it's at the forefront of many people's minds, particularly at the moment of the COVID-19 crisis, and we think about the pandemic and the devastating consequences of the pandemic and the impact that that's all having upon us. And I'm thinking that, emissions are continuing. So what is the impact of climate change going to be, and how's that going to impact upon us in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And I think in the back of my mind, well, everyone's considering that right now.
So, Reace, you're the youngest of the three.
Yeah.
How many groups are you a member of? Because I've kind of lost count.
Yeah, so there's multiple groups. It comes down to two main groups. So outside of the uni, I am an early career research member of UK CCSRC, and their mission is to make sure that CCS plays a role in the UK achieving its net zero emission targets. So as part of this membership, I've been able to attend numerous events, numerous workshops where I've been able to kind of network with peers as well as academics, and also learn a bit more about the field. So through UK CCSRC, me and another two ECR members were awarded funding to host a workshop at Thornton Science Park earlier this year in March. So this workshop was concerned with hydrogen technologies and CCS technologies. And we had some great speakers, we had a great turnout and some really positive feedback from that. And as well as that, I'm also a member of the Society of Chemical Industries Energy Group. So which again, that's been an excellent opportunity to network with experts in the energy field. And again, we've run webinars and we're hoping to run a conference in October around carbon dioxide and its role in decarbonisation.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a flavour of what I'm involved with.
And Caroline is your personal tutor, is it? Is that the
Yes.
connection there?
Yeah,
Right,
so
okay.
through undergrad, Carolina was my personal academic tutor, and now through the PhD, I have Carolina and Joe as academic tutors too.
Not a bad pairing there.
Oh, definitely not the best of the best.
Well, so Carolina, you've recently been awarded, I don't want to get this wrong, the Royal Academy of Engineering Leverhulme Trust Research Fellowship.
Yes.
Yeah, congratulations.
Right. Thank you.
I believe you studied in UNAM in Mexico. What was that like in comparison to the UK university courses that are offered over here?
Well, I guess there are few differences in terms of how universities are classified in Mexico. Because over there are private and public universities, and then within the public universities you have like research-based universities, and you also have technical universities. So UNAM is the biggest research-based public university in Mexico. So that's probably one of the reasons why I got into research, because most of my lecturers were doctors and they were always talking about their projects. I also started talking about the environment and problems related with environmental engineering, and that's how I ended in the UK in a way.
Right, okay. So the big one really, hydrogen. As a sole energy source for the UK, is that feasible or viable?
Reace.
It's not a silver bullet solution. However, I think it can address the majority of problems, yes. Purely comes down to whether we can produce it at scale and whether we've got the demand on the flip side of the coin, whether we've got the market built for this hydrogen to be used, is my personal opinion.
What about you two? Oh, go on, Carolina.
I guess it's one of the solutions to the problem. It has its potential, and I guess it will depend on other technologies, how they evolve, but it is a mixture of things that are needed to really tackle the problem. And well, one of the other things is how we change also as a society, because we can continue talking about better technologies, but we also need to stop consuming much.
And Joe?
You push an open door with me. So as you know, I chair this thing called the Northwest Hydrogen Alliance. I'm very much involved with the UK's Decarbonised Gas Alliance. And we've been pushing the hydrogen agenda over the last 4 or 5 years from a situation where it had very little traction to today, where it seems to be right at the top in so many ways of government thinking and the government's agenda. So you've got the industrial decarbonisation grand challenge, and hydrogen is very much in there. There's lots of work looking at the notion of how can we generate the molecules around hydrogen, what can it be used for, heat, transport, other dimensions, the low emissions associated with hydrogen. The only emission associated with hydrogen, colleagues, as you know, is water. And then how can we use that? Can we use that in terms of manufacturing, to move manufacturing across from a hydrocarbon economy into a clean economy? What are the various technologies associated with that? So we have numerous offerings at the University of Chester around fuel cells, around hydrogen from plastics. And so it's really exciting. And you know what, colleagues? The key exciting thing for me is, how our students are embracing this, you know. So we do all this wonderful science, we're working with industry, and then we're cascading that down into our undergraduate curriculum activities, and they're starting to talk about hydrogen and hydrogen futures now. Sorry, I'll shut up there, James, because it's really exciting.
So, Carolina, why are such drastic measures to changing into hydrogen or reducing emissions, why are they so important now?
Well, as we all are aware of the effects of these emissions on climate change and how much effort is needed to reduce those emissions, that depends on how we do things now. We cannot leave this problem to continue and just think that later, when technology advances, we can solve the problem later. We need to do things now, and we need to start changing the way we operate, the way we see things. And in part, this COVID period has shown how we can change, how we can quickly adapt. And that's one of the things that we need to take advantage at this moment.
So, Reace, why not electric? We've seen big changes in transport and all sorts of different uses of electric. Why is that not a feasible option either?
I think some of the challenges with electricity, again, I don't think that we won't have electricity in a low carbon future. We definitely will. It'll be a mixture of different technologies, different low carbon technologies. Some of the challenges with electricity, though, is to be sustainable, this electricity needs to be from renewable energy sources. And at the moment, well, and forever, it will be, the availability of renewable energy will be intermittent. You get sun at different times of the year for solar energy. You get wind at different times of the year for wind energy. And there's also the fact that at the moment, our electricity grids do not have the capacity to store all of this electricity. So there's that issue, and there's also cost implications with electricity technology as well. I think generally hydrogen technologies are considered to be the cheaper alternative to electricity. But like I say, I'm not an expert on electrified technology, so I'm going to stop there before I say something that's not technically correct.
Okay. So to have a hydrogen diversified economy, then what kind of infrastructure is needed, Carolina, or what kind of change do you predict in the next 12 months ish that will impact CCUS and hydrogen?
CCUS and well, that's a short period, but one of the things that I probably could start talking about, maybe a little bit about the HyNet initiative, because I guess if you talk about that short period of time, we're talking about technologies that are already available or the implementation of technologies that has been used in other sectors or into this context. And I think that's where you can start getting results relatively quickly. And that's the idea with HyNet, is taking advantage of those industries that are already emitting CO2, carbon dioxide, and they already capture that hydrogen, carbon dioxide, because they are producing hydrogen. And the only thing that is missing in that is that after all this complex process of capturing CO2, the pure carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere, and nothing is done with that, or what is being done is a small utilization of that carbon dioxide. And what we can do through this HyNet project is to invest on transport and storage to now stop releasing that gas into the atmosphere. And that's the easiest thing, I guess, that we could do at the moment. And then with time, we can invest in better technologies, in cleaner technologies, think about innovation, new processes to do things. But that's how we can start quickly and now.
Okay. So I guess a bit of a follow-up on that one then, Reese. What areas should we be researching on top of that? Carolina mentioned transport, but I guess what do we need to take forward?
Yeah, so I think as Carolina touched upon, she mentioned that the technology is there. And so I think in terms of hydrogen production, yes, the technology is there. We just need to make sure that it's optimal in terms of cost, efficiency, scalability. So if we are integrating this hydrogen technology with CCS technology, make sure that this overall system is as efficient and cost effective as it can be, so we can drive down costs and build economies of scale. But I also think there's other areas of research that we need to go into. For instance, on the flip side of the coin, the applications of hydrogen, there's a lot of regulatory barriers which still need to be addressed, particularly in the domestic sector, concerning the amount of hydrogen that you're allowed to blend with natural gas. If hydrogen is going to be supplied to homes, I think we need to continue the current work and do future work in building a safety evidence base for hydrogen, so these legislative barriers can be removed. And I also think there's a big social aspect as well. We've seen recently from the High Deploy project and the H21 project, we've had social research studies that have came out that have been looking at the social acceptance of hydrogen in the homes. However, when hydrogen economies are established, people are going to experience hydrogen in multiple aspects of the day-to-day lives, not just in the home. They'll experience it in industry, they'll experience it in the transport sector. So I think there really needs to be further work on the social implications of multiple applications of hydrogen technologies. So yeah, that's where I think research should be focused.
Okay. So we've touched on it a little bit, but carbon capture storage. Could you, Carolina, just give a bit of a brief overview of what it is and where we're up to on that? Because I think some people might not have a clue of that until a few years later.
Yeah, so carbon capture and storage, or CCS, is a combination of technologies or steps. And the first is to select the source where you want to remove the carbon dioxide. When we say carbon capture is related to removing carbon dioxide. And it can be, for example, a combustion process. And from that combustion, you have some exhaust gases that have, as part of that mixture, carbon dioxide. And if we release that exhaust gas, well, we're emitting this greenhouse gas. What we can do is to select an appropriate technology to separate the carbon dioxide from the rest of the gas mixture. And you get to basically two gas products. One is your clean gas, and the other is pure carbon dioxide. And then you have your second step in the process, which will be what you do with the carbon dioxide once it's removed. So there are basically two options. One is to use that carbon dioxide, but that sounds like a good solution, because it will be good to make use of that carbon dioxide, and it can have several applications. It could be used in the food industry to have the fizzy drinks in the food, for the packaging of food. You could use it in fire extinguishers and or you can even produce concrete materials and store it in that way permanently. But the issue is that if we're removing the carbon dioxide from large emitters, you are separating more carbon dioxide that you might find uses for. And that's where the storage come into place, because the other option is to actually compress and transport the carbon dioxide and then store that permanently underground. And that's where the CCS comes as an idea. It started with the idea of removing pollution from the power sector, but now it's moving into the industrial decarbonization.
Okay.
James, I'm really impressed by Carolina's passion. You can see how passionate she is about this. Yeah, maybe you'd like to ask Carolina a little bit more about her specialism, because she's just amazing at some of the works that she's doing around cryogenic carbon capture. I know you've broadly covered the issue of carbon capture utilization, carbon capture and storage, but Carolina, come on, talk a little bit more about some of the great work that you're doing on cryogenics.
Well, it started by first I was analyzing the typical or more mature carbon capture technologies. That's where I started like 8 years ago. And we were talking about using solvents to remove the carbon dioxide. That has some limitations because you have to regenerate the solvent. You use solvents that might be toxic, so you are adding something, again, something bad to the environment. And you also require energy to regenerate the solvent. And as an alternative option, you could use a cryogenic separation process. And with this, you don't need solvents. What you do is to do a physical separation in a process by cooling down the gas stream. And you cool down this gas stream to temperatures that are so low that you get to change the phase of the carbon dioxide from gas to solid. So you freeze this carbon dioxide and you get a frost CO2, and the rest of the gases will remain as in the gas phase. And you achieve that separation through this system. So you avoid the use of chemicals to separate the carbon dioxide, and you get a very pure carbon dioxide. So it's now ready for utilization because you are only removing the carbon dioxide, because the properties of the gases are so different that if you control the temperature, you are only removing that gas. Obviously, it has its challenges as well because you need refrigerants to achieve this process. But that's one of the areas that we are working on as well.
Okay. We'll touch on some of the more research, some of the other research projects. Louise will discuss that in a little bit. But I guess some of the bigger questions that all this research and carbon capture and looking into hydrogen technologies is all around net zero. I wondered if you could explain a bit more, Joe, in terms of what it is. Is it achievable? How does HyNet, CCS and other aspects fit into it?
Okay, just walk me through those three questions again, but give me one at a time, James. What was the first one?
So what is net zero?
Okay. So net zero is about trying to get the emissions from the UK or indeed the world down to zero. At the moment, the emissions have continually gone up over really since the Industrial Revolution, and that's causing global environmental change. Scientifically proven, we can't question it, that is happening. And there's a pressing need for us to reverse that and actually get down to zero emissions. Otherwise, we are on the verge of significant extreme events associated with global environmental change. And arguably, we're seeing them already. Within the UK, James, the government has actually established a target of net zero by 2050. So that's 30 years from now, this UK economy has to be net zero. And I think today, so one of the things we're talking about, hydrogen, carbon capture and utilization, carbon capture and storage, these are all part of the dimensions that will contribute towards that net zero aspect of the UK. What was the second question?
Is it achievable?
It's achievable, yes, but
Carolina's looking a bit.
yes,
that
Carolina,
maybe not be
it's
the case.
absolutely achievable, but we need the social dimensions and some of the things that Reace was talking about before. We need to make sure that the government is setting the right regulatory frameworks around this. Yes, it's set it as law, but are the incentives there? Yes, they are at the moment. Will it be there for the next 30 years? I'm looking for that consistency from government. And you need the academic parties to work together across different disciplines and across different institutions to make sure that we're not only pulling through the technologies, but we're pulling through the skills for the supply chain to deliver on net zero. James, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. Yes, it's achievable. What's the third question?
I think you pretty much answered it. It was kind of how everything fits in. But I guess I'll come to Reace on this one. In terms of net zero over the last few months, it's probably been impacted by COVID-19. What has been the kind of larger impacts and maybe the smaller ones as well?
Well, I think in the prime of lockdown, we've seen reductions in air pollution and carbon emissions as a result of the crisis. So I think because of that, people have generally seen COVID-19 as an opportunity or a second chance to really ramp up efforts in decarbonisation and to become more sustainable. And I don't think that's just a UK net zero thing. I think that's across the world. And in terms of hydrogen and CCS, our Prime Minister last month announced a £350 million pot for fueling the green recovery from coronavirus. And out of this pot, 139 was set aside for industrial decarbonisation. So that is for the transition from natural gas to hydrogen in industrial processes with CCS technologies. So I think overall that will have a positive impact on net zero. So I think COVID has helped in that regard.
Is it reverted back though, as we've started to see a bit more of a transition?
I think people, looking at articles that I've seen online, people fear that it's going to come back, emissions are going to come back worse than they were pre-lockdown. So I don't know. I think time will tell.
Okay.
James, can I come in there? I've been sorry. I don't want to cut across Reace here at all.
Okay.
But yeah, industry wants to make this happen. I've been so impressed with the way in which I think the three of us, Carolina, Reace, we find ourselves finding an open door with industry associated with the net zero grand challenge. And we're working on technologies. Those industries want to know about those technologies. The industries are throwing the challenges at us about how on earth can we do this? And the government's offering these incentives. And if the government actually now says, no, we're not going to do this, I think industry is going to ask some significantly challenging questions of the government, especially when it has promised this funding to industry. Industry wants to deliver on net zero. Industry can see how if it invests in these technologies, it can produce products which will be much more appealing to the younger generation, and indeed then export those technologies to the rest of the world, those ideas to the rest of the world on the back of these are net zero products, these are net zero manufacturing technologies.
So I guess tackling these issues, there's a UN climate change conference coming in November. Whether it will go ahead or not based on COVID-19, let's hope it will. It will happen in some way, won't it? But I guess, Reace, what outcomes would suggest a positive change in an industrial and social level? What would you like to see come out?
Yeah, so 2020 was going to be a big year for COP26. As part of the Paris Agreement, countries were required to update and enhance their nationally determined contributions. So these are pledges that each country makes to show how they're going to tackle their own greenhouse gas emissions. So we were expecting to receive them in the run-up to COP26. And I think at the moment in the UK, there's no definitive outline of the role, not just hydrogen, but any low carbon technology will have in the UK's decarbonisation strategy. There's no clear outline. So I think alongside these NDCs, if we could have some clear strategy, which hopefully will come out from the energy white paper when we get that too, but also some more funding packages, just stuff that will really help accelerate this and really clarify what role each technology will have. And I think that will help at an industrial and social level once we see this commitment from government.
Okay. Joe, what kind of is the impact of the figures like Greta Thunberg on the way sustainability is treated and looked at?
Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Oh, many people see her as potentially being a troublesome one. You know, is she 17 or 18? You know, I've got a son outside now, James. He's 15. It's piddling down out there. It's windy, and he's still out there pumping the iron, building up his body. The youth of today, they've got so much passion and so much energy, and she embodies that passion and that strength. I think she's captivated the imagination of a whole generation. You know, I look at my 18-year-old out there, 17, 18-year-old, and he gives me a hassle about, Dad, what have you done in relation to climate change? He blames me for being responsible for it all. And yet I've been campaigning, doing academic work on this for the last 30 years. And I feel as though I've done quite a lot, but he's pushing me to do more and more. You know, she's fabulous in the way that she's captured the imagination of a whole generation. And it's a generation that's concerned about inheriting this burden of climate change and the impact of climate change. Now, I remember really clearly, actually, a particular moment about Greta Thunberg at last year's climate change summit. We were talking about the UN climate change summit before, when she stood up in front of the world's leaders, this youngster, and said, "How dare you? How dare you?" She said, "Do you remember that, guys? How dare you? You know, what have you done? All you ever talk about is money. All you ever talk about is economic growth. And yet look at the legacy you're leaving me to deal with and my generation to deal with." And I guess you can see I'm passionate about that. As our Reace and Carolina, our work is all about trying to ensure that we try and hand on to this generation that's coming through something that was better than we inherited. And at least, you know, what we want to do is to make sure that our science, our passion is cascaded down to that generation that's going to inherit this burden. And I'm so impressed with the youngsters that are coming through to the University of Chester that really want to grapple with this issue. And I'm so impressed with having a Vice Chancellor that actually sees this notion of a student citizenship which has sustainability running through that. And that's one of the great things about working at our university, that there is this passion for that Greta generation to provide them or support them or enable them with the skills around clean growth.
Okay, just two more questions left. So maybe this is one for Reace and Carolina, but I guess Joe as well. STEM is obviously very male dominated as an industry, but what advice would you give, or what can be done to attract young people and especially young women to roles in STEM? Oh, go on, Reace.
Well, I don't know if this is specific to women, but what attracted me to the chemical engineering field, specifically kind of renewable technologies, low carbon technologies, is the fact, which does sound very cliche, that you're working in a field that is going to make a difference to the a positive difference to the environment. And if you take into consideration air pollution as well, people's general well-being. But I also think there's a bit more to that. It's more of a journey, like that you're building a skills force, and these people are working together to solve a problem that hasn't yet been solved. So this journey is going to be full of innovation, I'm sure, and full of job opportunities along the way. And it's just, like I say, tackling this problem that hasn't been solved. So that's what's inspired me to go down this route.
What inspired yourself, Carolina?
Well, in my case, I guess in my case was more related with having someone as a role model. In my case was my dad. He is a chemical engineer, and And I guess it's something that, well, at least in my years, it was not promoted really in the school. So you need someone else to actually tell you that you can go into engineering. Before deciding going into this degree, I talked a lot with my dad about that, trying to understand what was his work like, because I didn't have any idea of what meant to be a chemical engineer. I just saw him go to his work, and sometimes I went with him to his company during the weekends if he had to work. Additionally, he would take me if this was just a few hours. So I just knew the building, but I didn't knew what exactly he was doing. And having someone that tells you that this is an interesting field, the kinds of activities that you will do, you get more motivated to follow engineering. I knew that I like maths and chemistry. That's something that you can probably realize on your own, but then deciding what to do next, I think you need more support, because it's not easy to decide to be an engineer when you see only men. But all my classmates, you could discuss with them, and everyone that has an engineer parent was the dad and not the mom. So that's one of the things that needs to change.
What advice do you give then to young people trying to get into STEM subjects?
I guess you need to try to see more of what you can do, or get more excited about science or engineering. Go to more activities that allows you to see what is this about. Maybe going to festivals, or if the schools promote trips to universities, as we do in the faculty, maybe that's a way of getting more familiar with the field, and decide that this is a wonderful job.
Yeah, I completely agree with Carolina on that. It wasn't until it was like Carolina, I knew I loved maths and sciences over English and stuff like that. And it wasn't until it came to doing the UCAS application for uni that I actually stumbled on the different engineering courses you could go on, because again, like Carolina says, you don't really hear much about them. And so my advice would be, I remember having a conversation with Joe a few weeks ago now, and he was saying that he was taking his son, to various universities across the country, and he's only at GCSE level. And I thought, if I'd have had the opportunity to think about that at that age, then maybe I would have been more open to different courses that were out there. So yeah, I completely agree with what Carolina has said.
Okay, so just really to finish off, I'll go to you all individually. I just kind of want to know what projects you've got.
I get to say something about gender in relation to it.
Joe.
Being so gender biased, James.
They summed it up perfectly. I didn't think I had to.
I have some opinions about this as well. I hope they carry me some weight here, James. Blimey. Can I say something?
Yeah.
So I'm really struck. I've been in this game now for 35 years. And I said that when I started. 35 years in this, and it's very definitely a male-dominated profession, but it is changing. It is changing. There is still that gender gap, though, admittedly, within science. We've gone from a situation when I started off on my career when there might have only been about 10 or 15% of academics who were female in science. I think that's gone up to maybe about a third now, particularly when I look around the University of Chester science departments. It's probably about a third now. And at undergraduate level, it's probably somewhere between 40 and 50%. We're almost getting that even split now. So I'm pretty excited about the future. And you know, I'm sat here with Carolina and Reace, who they're already making a significant impact with their work on carbon capture, utilization, storage, hydrogen, technology, social engagement, political engagement. They're making a fabulous contribution, and there's role models to look up to as well here in the university. I mentioned before about our new Vice Chancellor, Professor Eunice Simmons. She's a scientist, so we've got a scientist right at the helm of our university talking about sort of citizen-student, talking about equality of opportunity all the time. So I'm absolutely convinced that at the University of Chester, we're going to see further changes as we transition to a much more equal basis within the science disciplines, if I may. But there's other things as well that we're doing, which I think are great. We've got this Women in Science and Engineering, and I think both Carolina and Reace have been involved in that, pulling forward, highlighting specific role models around the UK and actually bringing them into the University of Chester to do keynotes and having them engage proactively with outreach works with schools and things, hoping to try and change some of those embedded cultural issues that perhaps Carolina was talking about before. But I think things like this, James, things like this have a really important role to play as well, where we can highlight our talents and the dynamism that we can have across the genders and across the ages here. And I know I'm the old bloke in this conversation, but at the same time, I'm so impressed with the talent I've got here. You know, we've got Carolina here, who's got a Royal Academy Fellowship, for heaven's sake. That's nothing. That's nothing to be shy of. It's a really amazing feat to have. And Carolina is on her way to being a chair in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm absolutely convinced about that. She's tomorrow's leader, if she's not already there already. And then the next generation coming through here as well with Reace in terms of the work that she's doing. What, 21, 22, 23, and we've already got someone that's out there promoting the agenda. So I think we've got some fabulous role models here at the University of Chester, and I'm really pleased with the way things are progressing in terms of gendered opportunities.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to come to you individually, and you're going to have to say what you're doing at the University of Chester and what kind of projects you've got coming up. Just a little shameless plug for you all. So we'll start with Reace. What have we got going on at the moment?
So, well, throughout lockdown, I have been working on a review article, which is just summarising the status of hydrogen technology in the UK. I have submitted that now to a journal, and I'm waiting to hear back whether it will be published or not. And alongside that, I am approaching the end of my second year of the PhD. So up to this point, I've had the chance to go out and collect the majority of me primary data. So I've obtained that data by interviewing key stakeholders in the Northwest region who are concerned with the hydrogen field. So I'm at a position now where I can really dig into the data analysis component of the research and kind of see how that correlates to the broader philosophical aim. And outside of the uni, as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the organising committee for the October conference that the SCI Energy Group are running on carbon dioxide and its role in decarbonisation. So just some last minute prep for that.
Okay. What have you got coming up at the moment, Carolina? I noticed you got many projects coming up when I did a bit of research. Could you give me a bit about all of them if you can, if possible?
Since the lockdown, there are 2 projects that I concluded by July, and both were related with work for a startup company called PNW Technology. And with this company is where I'm working on this cryogenic carbon capture process, the commercial side of the research. So we did 2 projects. One was an internal project funded by the KT grant, and we did modeling work in preparation to build a pilot plant. And the other project was a consultancy support for BMW technology in relation to a project funded by the Department for Transport. And in that, we were looking at the feasibility of using the cryogenic process for a shipping application. So introducing this cryogenic process to capture the emissions in ships. So those two were concluded in July. And in June, I started a project funded by UK CCSRC in collaboration with the University of Edinburgh. And what we are doing is to do more fundamental research of this cryogenic process. We want to understand better the behavior of frosting CO2 by introducing tomography sensors that allows you to visualize the process, how the crystals grows inside the equipment. And Edinburgh has the experience with tomography, and we have the cryogenic experience, so we're working together. We have been working mostly on simulation work because we have not been able to go back to the lab. But as soon as we can, we hopefully mid of September, we will start doing experiments again. And the other thing is prepare for the fellowship, which should start in September. And also, I'm also getting ready for a new studentship related with modeling work on hydrogen integrated with carbon capture.
Okay, that's quite the list. Good luck with all of those.
Yes.
And well done on the ones that finished in July. So, Jo, just a bit about what you're doing and what kind of projects the Thornton Energy Research Institute are planning on carrying out over the next few months.
So Carolina puts me to shame with that list, I have to say. She's remarkably busy. Fabulous, fabulous list. I'll talk about three projects very, very briefly, James, if I may. Firstly, I've been involved with some. I am involved with some with a government-funded project looking at industrial roadmaps to net zero in the Northwest. And we're working with government, we're working with industry, we're working with communities, we're working with the university to flesh out a roadmap for the next 30 years to actually deliver net zero by 2050. A timeline, what needs to be done, where it needs to be done, what skills do we need to enable that to happen? That then helps us, of course, within university to make sure that our curriculum is right to deliver on that particular agenda. I've also been very much involved in supporting something called the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, which again is government funded. It's based at Heriot-Watt University, but it's about accelerating technologies through to deployment, which may be at early technology readiness level now for industry, but maybe by 10 years' time, it will be ready for deployment. And I've been named within that particular centre as being the Northwest academic lead around that. So I'm really, really proud of that. And again, that will be a fabulous opportunity to make sure I'm interchanging with other regions and with other industries around this sort of technology roadmap and technology development that can be deployed. And then the third project is a deployment project. It's the HyNet project that's been mentioned a couple of times, and it's about working with some of the major industries within the Cheshire area, deploying hydrogen technologies, deploying carbon capture technologies, because we genuinely believe that by 2030 we can halve the amount of emissions that we had in the area in comparison with 1990, which is where we started off. And by 2040, we believe we can actually achieve net zero within Cheshire itself. And so that's much more of a shovel-ready project, and it is ready to go. We're in the process of finalising our bid to the government, and we rather hope that we will be able to put spades in ground to deliver on net zero for a number of the big industries around us by January 2021. That's 4 months away. You know, that's a sort of, you know, that's how important this is right now, and the opportunity here at the University of Chester to engage with that. And yeah, I have to say, just amazing having Carolina and Reace to work with on these sort of projects. I'll leave it there, James.
Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you all for attending.